Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The midday sun beat down heavily on the military base as General Marcus Thompson, his 4-star badge shining brightly on his impeccable uniform, crossed the parking lot to his office. His gait, firm and assured, reflected years of discipline and command. He nodded to a few officers, absorbed in the notes on his tablet. Suddenly, flashing lights flashed behind him. Before he could comprehend, 2 municipal police officers surrounded him. "Sir, you are under arrest," one of them ordered, his tone sharp and condescending. Marcus, surprised, raised his hands calmly. "On what basis?" "I am General Marcus Thompson of the United States Army." The policeman sneered, pointedly ignoring his words. "You know what that is? Respect has to be earned." Despite his rank and insignia, the general was handcuffed and led to the police vehicle. Passers-by murmured, some in shock, others holding up their phones to film. Marcus remained calm, but his inner anger was boiling. He knew this treatment had nothing to do with the law. Inside the vehicle, he took out his secure phone. A single press and an authoritative voice answered on the other end, "This is the Pentagon." Moments later, the tension in the police car rose. The officers, suddenly realizing the monumental mistake they had just made, exchanged panicked glances. General Thompson, still calm, said slowly, "You will regret ignoring rank and responsibility." In a matter of minutes, what seemed like a routine arrest turned into an administrative and legal storm that would shake the entire police department. General Marcus Thompson had spent his life commanding with rigor and respect. But nothing had prepared him for being arrested in broad daylight, in front of civilians and his colleagues. The handcuffs tightening on his wrists only strengthened his resolve. Inside the police vehicle, the silence was heavy. The 2 officers, visibly uncomfortable, exchanged furtive glances. One of them attempted a remark, we didn't know that." Marcus cut him off abruptly, his voice cold and steady. "Don't say anything. You violated the most basic protocol. You judged me before you even knew who I was." The policeman frowned. "But you are." "I'm General Marcus Thompson, 4-star, Commander of Forces Eastern. And you've just made a mistake that will have consequences." Marcus then took out his secure phone. With a simple press of a button, a direct line to the Pentagon opened. "This is Thompson," he said calmly. "I need immediate assistance." Behind him, the police officers paled. They realized that what they had thought would be a harmless arrest was about to turn into a catastrophe for them. The general, always calm, felt his anger rising, but controlled his tone. Every word was calculated, every gesture precise. He knew his response would not be physical, but administrative and legal. Justice, this time, would be merciless. Outside, passers-by continued to film. The cameras would tell a very different version of the story the police wanted to hide. And Marcus already knew that these videos would become irrefutable evidence. As the car pulled up in front of the police station, Marcus sat up straight in the seat, his gaze sharp, ready to turn this humiliation into a memorable lesson for those who thought they could intimidate a black general in the United States Armed Forces. As soon as Marcus arrived at the police station, he was taken to a secluded waiting room. The officers responsible for his arrest tried to justify their actions, but their nervousness betrayed their panic. Marcus sat straight, his eyes fixed on the door. He knew every second counted. Then he picked up his secure phone again and called his assistant at the Pentagon. "This is Thompson," he said calmly. "Prepare the full incident report for my office and alert the Inspector General of Police immediately." A few moments later, the room was filled with a murmur of surprise. One of the policemen, trembling, whispered, It's General Thompson." Marcus stood slowly, his gaze sweeping the room, cold and merciless. "I want every detail of this illegal arrest recorded. Every surveillance camera, every witness. You will answer for your actions to your superiors and to the public." The phone rang again. It was a senior officer at the Pentagon. In less than 5 minutes, Marcus had set in motion an administrative and judicial chain of command that would trap them. The police officers realized they had no control. In the hallway, the officers who had witnessed the arrest began to whisper among themselves. News of the incident was spreading quickly through the station. Marcus knew public opinion would be on his side. The humiliation he was suffering would turn against those who had caused it. As he left the room for questioning, Marcus calmly said, "What you just did is not only illegal, it is an insult to honor and justice. Prepare to answer for every action, because I never forget, and I never let injustice go unpunished." The police, for the first time, realized they were not dealing with anyone weak or intimidating. They had just unleashed the Marcus Thompson storm. No sooner had General Thompson's call been received than the Inspector General's office was thrown into a frenzy. The incident had just crossed the threshold of the Pentagon, and every detail of the illegal arrest had to be verified immediately. At the police station, Marcus was led into an interrogation room, but this time the atmosphere had changed. The officers who had handcuffed him were now silent, their gaze shifty. Panic was evident on their faces. Marcus sat calmly, his hands still cuffed. "Your actions were recorded by witnesses and cameras," he said coldly. "Every detail will be reported to your superiors. You will be held accountable." At that moment, a sergeant rushed in. "General Thompson." We received a call from the Inspector General. We've been asked to prepare a full report on the incident." Marcus nodded slowly. "Very well. And make sure this report accurately reflects what happened. No detail should be omitted. You'll understand what it means to underestimate someone you think is weak." Meanwhile, at the Pentagon, Marcus's superiors learned of the affair. The military and civilian hierarchy immediately went on alert. The police, who thought they were acting with impunity, suddenly found themselves in a situation they had never imagined. Marcus felt the tension rising, but he kept his composure. He knew his response had to be methodical, precise, and public. The humiliation he had suffered would not go unpunished. "You thought you could intimidate a black general," he said, his icy gaze fixed on the police officers. "You're about to discover that every action has its consequences. And believe me, they will be severe." In the corridors of the police station, whispers turned to rumors. The police had just made a serious mistake, and General Marcus Thompson was going to make sure it did not go unpunished. Marcus Thompson knew that in the modern world, justice wasn't served solely by offices and official reports. Bystanders' cameras and cell phones had captured the entire arrest. This evidence had to be used to its fullest potential. Sitting in the interrogation room, he pulled out another secure phone and contacted his press officer. "Prepare an official statement," he ordered calmly. "The incident must be made public within 30 minutes, with all visual evidence. No detail must be omitted." Meanwhile, the police officers responsible for his arrest were summoned before their superiors. Their pale faces betrayed panic. The hierarchy, alerted by the Pentagon, was already beginning to weigh the consequences of a racist act committed in broad daylight. Marcus's official statement was circulated on social media and relayed by several local media outlets. The video of his arrest was now circulating on all platforms, accompanied by a cold, factual statement. A 4-star general had been illegally arrested by police officers, and the Pentagon had intervened to investigate. Public opinion quickly grew outraged. Calls for respect for authority and justice multiplied. Marcus knew that this media pressure was a powerful weapon. The police officers responsible were now under fire from public opinion, the hierarchy, and the judicial system. The tension in the police station was palpable. The officers stared at their television screens, their throats tight. Every comment on social media, every news report, reinforced the weight of their mistake. Marcus, however, remained calm. He had transformed his personal situation into a demonstration of justice and self-control. The humiliation he had suffered was now being turned against those who had thought they could harm him. "You thought you could arrest me without consequences," he told the officers coldly. "Now you'll understand what it means to underestimate someone who is never intimidated." The next morning, the atmosphere at the police station was stifling. The superiors of the arresting officers had called an emergency meeting. Marcus Thompson, still under surveillance but free to move around, calmly observed the situation unfolding. At the Pentagon, the Inspector General had opened an immediate internal investigation. Every police officer involved would be questioned, and all body-worn and surveillance video recordings were already being analyzed. The mistakes and overt racism could no longer be ignored. At the police station, the officers in charge were called one by one to answer specific questions. Shifty glances and hesitations betrayed their nervousness. Lies and improvised excuses only worsened their situation. Marcus, informed of every step by his press officer and his contacts at the Pentagon, remained impassive. Every move by the local police, every document filed, every testimony gathered served his strategy, to transform the initial humiliation into a public example of relentless justice. In the media, reports and analyses multiplied. Military commentators highlighted the absurdity and gravity of arresting a four-star general, while citizens called for severe sanctions against the police. The pressure mounted inexorably. Marcus knew that his patience and calm were more powerful weapons than anger. He let the system and public opinion do their work, and he was already preparing to strike at another level: military justice and the careers of racist police officers. Every action has its consequences, he muttered to himself. And those who underestimated me will soon understand the power of justice and truth. In the days that followed, the officers responsible for General Thompson's arrest began to feel the weight of their actions. Fear had settled into their minds. Every ringing phone, every email from the Pentagon or the Inspector General, made them nervous. Inside the police station, their colleagues whispered behind their backs. Some looked at their computer screens and saw the videos of the arrest go viral. Social media was rife with outraged comments, analytical articles, and even former soldiers expressing their dismay. Marcus, however, remained calm and methodical. He knew that his opponent's fear and panic were powerful allies. He continued to coordinate every step with his contacts at the Pentagon and within the police inspectorate. Every investigative report, every testimony gathered, would directly strengthen his position and undermine that of the racist police officers. At a disciplinary meeting, the officers were confronted with the gravity of their mistake. Their superiors looked at them sternly, and the tone they used left no room for excuses. Marcus, even physically absent, weighed on the room simply by the threat of his interventions. Their superiors began to consider severe sanctions, suspension, in-depth disciplinary investigations, and even dismissal for some. The police officers understood that they were now isolated, exposed, and vulnerable. In his temporary office at the police station, Marcus took a moment to reflect. He knew his response had to be comprehensive, not just for himself, but to send a clear message that racism and abuse of power would never go unpunished, especially against someone of his rank. The storm he had unleashed had barely begun. And the police officers who thought they had it under control were now at the center of a whirlwind from which they would not emerge unscathed. The pressure on the police officers responsible for the illegal arrest was becoming unbearable. Marcus Thompson, always calm and methodical, saw every move his opponents made backfire. He now had complete control of the situation, not through force, but through truth and public opinion. Military and civilian media reported the incident accurately. A four-star general had been arrested without justification by racist police officers. The footage captured by witnesses, combined with official statements from the Pentagon, made any attempt to downplay the incident impossible. At the police station, the officers were questioned continuously. Every lie, every contradiction in their statements strengthened the case against them. Marcus, informed in real time by his contacts, knew exactly what evidence to highlight to maximize the impact. At a press conference organized by his team, Marcus appeared with impressive calm. He explained the events factually, emphasizing the importance of respecting authority, justice, and discipline. Each carefully measured word, each measured sentence, transformed the humiliation he had suffered into a demonstration of power and control. The officers, aware that their careers were now at stake, could no longer back down. Their superiors began preparing severe sanctions, immediate suspensions, thorough disciplinary investigations, and, for some, outright dismissal. Marcus knew this wasn't just a personal victory, it was a message to all those who believed they could abuse their power and position to intimidate or humiliate others. Justice, when used well, is relentless. In the silence of his temporary office, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The initial humiliation had turned to triumph. The racist police officers were now trapped by their own actions, and the truth was coming to light. In the following weeks, the administrative and media machine set in motion by Marcus Thompson reached its peak. The police officers responsible for his illegal arrest were confronted with the results of the internal investigation. The evidence was overwhelming: videos, witness statements, contradictory reports, and even their own confessions. Their superiors, unable to turn a blind eye, announced the first sanctions. 2 police officers were immediately suspended, pending a final decision on dismissal. The others were subject to in-depth disciplinary investigations. The reputation they had believed intact was destroyed in just a few weeks. Meanwhile, the media continued to report on the case. Marcus's images and statements had sparked a wave of public outrage against abuses of power and institutional racism. Military and civilian voices praised his calm and strategic approach, while racist police officers were held up as examples not to be followed. Marcus, meanwhile, had regained his dignity and authority intact. Every step of the response had been planned and executed with precision. What had begun as a public humiliation turned into a moral and professional triumph. At an informal ceremony in his office, his military colleagues congratulated him on his exemplary handling of the crisis. Marcus looked at them calmly. "Discipline and respect are not privileges, they are obligations," he said. "And those who forget that end up paying the price." On the outside, the racist police officers were beginning to face the personal and professional consequences of their actions: ruined reputations, damaged careers, and a painful lesson about the power of truth and justice. Marcus stood at his office window, gazing out over the city. He knew this victory went far beyond himself. It was a reminder that even the most powerful can be confronted with the truth, and that injustice, if left unchallenged, always ends up backfiring on those who commit it. With the dismissal of the racist officers and the sanctions imposed, the entire precinct experienced a profound change. The officers' initial fear had given way to a new awareness: no one was above the law, and any abuse of power could have irreversible consequences. Marcus Thompson, meanwhile, was returning to his military routine, but the incident set a powerful precedent. His actions sent a clear message: racism and bullying would never be tolerated, even in institutions meant to protect and serve. Training and awareness-raising meetings were held within the police station. Line managers used the case as a concrete example of what to avoid. Young officers, once intimidating and sometimes arrogant, began to reflect on their behavior. Marcus, invited to speak at conferences on discipline and integrity, became a symbol of justice and self-control. His experience showed that power lies not in brute force, but in strategy, patience, and moral courage. On the streets, those who had filmed the arrest and shared the videos continued to receive messages of gratitude. The general had transformed a personal injustice into a collective victory, and the story became a textbook case study on how to deal with institutional racism. For Marcus, this case was not only a personal victory, but a lesson for all: even in the face of arrogance and injustice, truth and justice always triumph. A few months after the incident, the precinct had changed. Fear and arrogance had given way to a new respect for discipline and justice. The officers responsible for the racist arrest had their careers shattered: some had been dismissed, others had been transferred or suspended, each bearing the brunt of their actions. Marcus Thompson returned to full military duty, but he knew his role now extended beyond mere command. He had become a living symbol, one who, with calm, strategy, and courage, could transform injustice into a universal lesson. At a recognition ceremony, his military and civilian colleagues congratulated him. "You have shown that dignity and justice do not depend on fear or force," said a general. Marcus nodded, humble but firm. "Justice is a responsibility, not a privilege. And everyone must answer for it." Outside, the city and the media continued to recount the story, no longer as a scandal, but as an inspiring example. Young officers, citizens, and even novice police officers took note. Arrogance and racism come at a price, but truth and justice always triumph. Marcus stood in front of his desk and gazed out over the city one last time. The humiliation he had suffered had turned into a lasting triumph. He knew his actions wouldn't change the world overnight, but they had paved the way for a culture of accountability and respect. In the newfound calm of his office, he murmured to himself, "Those who underestimate justice always end up paying for it. And those who respect it can make a difference." Thus ends the story of a 4-star general, arrested by racist police officers, but who was able to transform a humiliation into a resounding victory, leaving behind an indelible lesson for all.